When people hear the words gated community, they picture safety, tall iron gates, keycard entry, security cameras mounted on clean stucco walls, a guardhouse with someone watching a bank of screens. The promise is simple: what's outside stays outside. Trouble doesn't get in. But that promise is often more about comfort than reality. A secure community creates a powerful illusion. The gates don't just block cars. They lower suspicion. Residents assume that anyone inside belongs there. If someone is walking a dog, jogging, or checking their mailbox, they must be a neighbor. If a car drives slowly down the street, it's probably just someone looking for an address. People stop questioning what they see because the environment feels controlled. That feeling changes how people behave. Inside these neighborhoods, rules are everywhere. There are regulations about paint colors, parking spots, lawn maintenance, trash bins, holiday decorations. Homeowners associations send warnings about weeds that are half an inch too tall. Residents learn that enforcement is constant. Someone is always watching. Over time, that constant monitoring shifts from property to people. When safety becomes branding, residents start to see themselves as part of a protected class. They pay fees for it. They attend meetings about it. They remind guests about it. We're very strict here, they say with pride. But strict about what? Often, it's about appearances. Clean sidewalks, quiet nights, predictable behavior. Anything that looks out of place becomes suspicious. The irony is that the gates are designed to keep outsiders out, but the real tension often grows inside. People begin to police each other. A teenager walking alone might draw more attention than a stranger driving through. Someone who doesn't look like they belong can trigger whispers, even if they live 2 houses down. The sense of ownership over shared space turns into control. The illusion of safety makes confrontation feel justified. In a regular neighborhood, people might hesitate before stepping into someone else's business. They might think, "It's not my place." But in a gated community, that line blurs. Residents feel empowered. They believe they are protecting the community. And once someone believes they're protecting something, their behavior changes. They become bolder, louder, more certain they're right. Security features also create overconfidence. Cameras are visible. Signs warn that the area is under surveillance. Patrol vehicles circle slowly. All of it suggests that danger would be noticed immediately, that someone is always watching. But cameras don't interpret behavior. They don't understand tone. They don't step in when a conversation turns aggressive. They record after the fact. And guards are not everywhere at once. The presence of security can give residents a false sense of backup. They assume that if things escalate, someone official will appear. That assumption can push people to act in ways they normally wouldn't. They speak more sharply. They demand explanations. They question strangers with authority they don't actually have. The environment feels controlled, so they feel in control. Another layer of the illusion is reputation. Secure communities market themselves as peaceful, family-friendly, and exclusive. That reputation becomes part of residents' identity. When something challenges that image, people react strongly. Not because there's real danger, but because the idea of danger threatens the brand. A group of adults confronting a teenager doesn't look like disorder to them. In their minds, they are preserving order. They convince themselves they're preventing a problem before it starts. The gate behind them reinforces that belief. The clean streets support it. The uniform houses make it seem reasonable. But safety built on appearances is fragile. It depends on everyone fitting neatly into expectations. It depends on quick judgments. It depends on who is seen as belonging and who is not. When someone doesn't fit the image, even slightly, suspicion can grow faster than facts. That's how a place designed to feel safe can become intimidating. The illusion isn't that nothing bad ever happens. It's that nothing bad can happen. That belief dulls awareness. It replaces curiosity with certainty. It turns neighbors into enforcers. It shifts focus from actual threats to perceived ones. And when that illusion is strong enough, people stop asking if they should intervene. They only ask how. There's something unsettling about adults confronting a teenager as if she's a threat. Not asking questions. Not checking facts. Just stepping in with raised voices and rigid posture, convinced they're in the right. Authority, when misused, doesn't always look dramatic. It can look calm, controlled, even polite at first. It starts with a tone that says, "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" It carries the weight of adulthood, of homeownership, of years lived. Against a teenager, that weight feels heavier than it should. In many communities, adults assume automatic authority over young people. Age becomes proof of credibility. A teen's words are questioned before they're even spoken. If there's a disagreement, the adult version is believed faster. That imbalance sets the stage for something unfair before the conversation even begins. A teenager walking home, sitting on a curb, or scrolling through her phone should not need to justify her presence in her own neighborhood. Yet when adults approach with suspicion instead of curiosity, the interaction shifts from conversation to interrogation. The adult stands taller. The teen stands smaller. Even if she doesn't shrink physically, the pressure is there. Adults often frame their behavior as concern. "We're just making sure everything is okay." But concern doesn't corner someone. It doesn't block their path or demand identification. It doesn't speak over them or dismiss their explanation. When multiple adults gather around a single teen, the message is clear: you are outnumbered. That dynamic matters. A group of adults carries social power. They have established relationships in the community. They attend HOA meetings. They vote. They pay dues. They know the rules and sometimes helped write them. A teenager, even if she lives there, doesn't hold that same standing. She doesn't sit at the table where decisions are made. When adults misuse authority, they often don't see it as misuse. They see it as responsibility. They tell themselves they're protecting property values or keeping the neighborhood safe. But safety doesn't require intimidation. Protection doesn't require humiliation. The tone shifts quickly once doubt enters the room. Questions turn into accusations. "You don't live here. Who are your parents? We've never seen you before." The teen's answers are measured against assumptions, not evidence. If she responds with frustration, it's labeled disrespect. If she responds quietly, it's labeled suspicious. There's no winning position. It's especially troubling when adults forget the basic boundary between guidance and control. A parent has authority over their child. A teacher has authority in a classroom. But neighbors do not automatically have authority over someone else's teenager simply because they're older. That line gets blurred in communities where rules are emphasized over relationships. When rules dominate, enforcement becomes a habit. Adults get used to correcting, reporting, and warning. They monitor trash cans, parking spots, and landscaping. Over time, that monitoring can spill over onto people. They begin to treat behavior the same way they treat violations. Something looks off, so they step in. But a teenager is not a misplaced trash bin. There's also the element of power in numbers. One adult approaching a teen can already feel intimidating. 2 or 3 shifts the energy entirely. The teen's space feels smaller. Her voice feels weaker. Even if no one touches her, the physical presence alone can feel like a wall closing in. Adults sometimes underestimate how frightening that can be. They may believe they're having a normal conversation. But from the teen's perspective, it's different. Her heart rate rises. She calculates her options. She wonders if anyone will believe her version later. She senses that the outcome depends less on truth and more on who appears more credible. When authority is misused, it often hides behind phrases like, "We're just asking questions," or "If you have nothing to hide, why are you upset?" Those phrases shift blame. They suggest that the teen's discomfort is the problem, not the confrontation itself. There's also the issue of escalation. Adults who feel challenged can double down quickly. If a teen stands her ground, it's seen as defiance. If she tries to walk away, it's seen as guilt. What began as suspicion becomes a power struggle. The adults feel the need to assert control, not because there's danger, but because their authority feels questioned. And once that happens, the original reason for the confrontation barely matters. What remains is the imbalance. Grown individuals using their status, their confidence, and their collective presence to dominate someone younger. A situation that could have been resolved with a simple, respectful question instead turns into a show of force. Misused authority doesn't always leave visible marks. Sometimes it leaves something quieter. A teen who thinks twice before walking alone. A young person who learns that adults can't always be trusted. A reminder that power, when unchecked, can shift from protection to pressure in a matter of minutes. There's a moment in situations like this when other people notice what's happening. A curtain shifts slightly. A front door opens halfway. Someone pauses mid-step during an evening walk. They see a group of adults gathered too closely around a single teenager. They hear the sharp tone. They sense the imbalance. And then they hesitate. Bystanders rarely see themselves as part of the problem. In their minds, they're neutral. They're not the ones raising their voices. They're not blocking anyone's path. They're just observing. But silence in the face of pressure isn't neutral. It has weight. In tight-knit communities, reputation matters. No one wants to be labeled dramatic or confrontational. Speaking up means stepping into conflict. It means possibly disagreeing with neighbors you see every day. It means risking awkward encounters at the mailbox or during HOA meetings. So people tell themselves it's safer to stay out of it. They convince themselves there must be a reason. Maybe the teenager did something. Maybe the adults know more than it appears. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding. Those assumptions create distance. They give bystanders permission to remain passive. It feels easier to trust the authority of a group than to question it. There's also a psychological pull toward the majority. When several adults are aligned in suspicion, it creates a sense of certainty. Even if one person watching feels uncomfortable, the fact that others seem confident can override that discomfort. They wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't serious, someone might think. That thought becomes justification for silence. The teenager, however, feels the absence. She notices who is watching. She sees the neighbors standing a few steps away, pretending to check their phones or adjust their trash bins. She realizes that no one is stepping forward to ask if she's okay. The isolation grows heavier because it's public. Bystanders often underestimate how much a single voice can shift a situation. One calm question like, "Is everything all right here?" can change the tone. It reminds everyone that the interaction is visible. It breaks the illusion that the group's authority is unquestioned. But speaking up requires courage, and courage isn't always convenient. Fear plays a role. People worry about being wrong. What if they intervene and the teen actually is trespassing? What if the adults turn their frustration toward them? What if it escalates further? That fear of escalation keeps many people rooted in place. They choose personal comfort over potential conflict. In communities that emphasize order, bystanders may feel pressure to support enforcement, not challenge it. If the dominant culture values strict rule following, questioning someone who appears to be enforcing those rules can feel like betrayal. Silence becomes a way to align with the perceived majority. There's also the assumption that someone else will step in. When multiple people are watching, responsibility gets diluted. Each person thinks, if this were serious, someone would say something. That thought spreads quietly through the crowd. The result is collective inaction. Everyone waits. No one moves. Meanwhile, the teenager stands alone. Even subtle actions matter. A neighbor walking closer instead of farther. Someone offering to call her parents. A simple statement like, "She lives here." These small gestures can defuse tension. They can remind adults that their perspective isn't the only one in the space. But when bystanders stay silent, the message to the adults is reinforcement. No one is objecting. No one is challenging their tone. The lack of pushback feels like approval. It gives them confidence to continue. Their voices grow firmer. Their posture stiffens. The situation stretches longer than it should. Silence also shapes the story afterward. When events are retold, those who watched but didn't intervene may describe themselves as witnesses. They might say they didn't want to get involved. They might frame it as staying neutral. But neutrality in moments of imbalance often favors the side with power. Communities pride themselves on looking out for one another. The phrase gets repeated at meetings and printed in newsletters. Yet looking out for one another means more than reporting rule violations. It means protecting the vulnerable when power tilts too far in one direction. Bystanders don't always realize that their inaction becomes part of the memory. The teenager won't just remember the adults who confronted her. She'll remember the faces that watched, the doors that stayed closed, the voices that never spoke. That silence can linger longer than the confrontation itself. Choosing silence feels small in the moment. It feels temporary. But in situations where authority presses down on someone younger and outnumbered, silence doesn't disappear. It fills the space where support should have been. Being forced to stand your ground isn't the same as choosing to. For a teenager, that difference matters. She didn't wake up that day planning to defend her right to walk through her own neighborhood. She wasn't looking for a confrontation. She was moving through a space that was supposed to feel normal. Familiar sidewalks. Houses she recognized. The routine comfort of home. Then the path narrowed. When adults surround a teen with suspicion, there's a split-second decision that happens internally. Do you shrink or do you steady yourself? Do you apologize just to make it end, even if you've done nothing wrong? Or do you speak clearly and risk being labeled disrespectful? Standing her ground doesn't mean shouting. It often starts with something quieter. A steady voice saying, "I live here." A refusal to hand over information that isn't owed. A decision not to let fear dictate every word. That calmness can frustrate adults who expect compliance. Teenagers are often told to respect authority. The lesson is repeated in classrooms and at home. Listen to adults. Don't talk back. Be polite. But what happens when the adults are wrong? What happens when respect is demanded without fairness? She feels the pressure to stay composed. Her heart might be racing. Her hands might be trembling slightly. But she knows that any visible emotion could be used against her. If she cries, she's dramatic. If she raises her voice, she's aggressive. So she calculates every response. She chooses words carefully. She keeps her shoulders squared even if she wants to step away. There's courage in that restraint. It would be easier to call someone immediately. Easier to walk off if they'd let her. Easier to avoid eye contact and mumble an apology just to dissolve the tension. But standing her ground means holding eye contact. It means repeating the truth when it's questioned again. It means not surrendering her space. Adults sometimes mistake that steadiness for defiance. They expect teens to fold under pressure. When that doesn't happen, they push harder. They repeat their demands. They question her tone. They imply consequences. The air thickens with the suggestion that she should know her place. But she does know her place. It's right there. On that sidewalk. In that neighborhood. In front of the house she's walked past 100 times. Standing her ground also requires trust in herself. She has to believe that her presence is valid. That she doesn't need permission to exist in a shared space. That being younger doesn't mean being wrong. That belief can be fragile when challenged by multiple adults at once. There's a physical aspect to it, too. She plants her feet instead of stepping back. She keeps her phone in her hand, but doesn't clutch it nervously. She resists the urge to look down. Body language becomes part of the statement. Not aggressive, not submissive, just firm. Inside, though, questions spin. Will they call security? Will they call her parents? Will this turn into something bigger? She weighs the risks of every possible outcome. Yet she chooses not to give them what they seem to want, which is fear or submission. Standing her ground is also about boundaries. When an adult asks for personal details that feel intrusive, she decides how much to share. When they speak over her, she waits for a pause and repeats herself. When they imply she doesn't belong, she corrects them without apology. That takes more strength than most people realize. Teenagers are often underestimated. Adults assume they lack confidence or awareness. But in moments like this, a teen learns quickly how to navigate power. She reads tone. She senses shifts in posture. She understands when someone is trying to intimidate rather than understand. Her steadiness can unsettle the group. They may have expected quick compliance. They may have assumed she would crumble under scrutiny. Instead, she remains rooted. Not loud, not hostile, just unwilling to accept unfair treatment. That refusal changes the dynamic slightly. The adults can continue pressing, but they can't claim she's hysterical. They can question her, but they can't say she ran. Her composure forces them to confront the reality that they're arguing with someone who isn't actually doing anything wrong. Standing her ground doesn't erase the fear. It doesn't make the situation comfortable. It doesn't guarantee immediate resolution. What it does is draw a quiet line. It says, without shouting, that being young does not mean being powerless. There's a shift that happens when a parent steps into a situation like this. The energy changes before a single word is spoken. What felt unbalanced a moment ago suddenly meets resistance. A mother doesn't approach the scene casually. She walks in already aware that her child felt cornered. That knowledge sharpens her focus. She doesn't need a full briefing to recognize tension. She reads it in her daughter's posture, in the tightness around her eyes, in the way the adults are positioned too close. Unlike her daughter, she isn't navigating this space from a place of reduced power. She's an adult. She's a homeowner. She understands the language of authority that the group has been using, and she knows how to speak it fluently. The first thing she does is reclaim space. Maybe she steps physically between her daughter and the group. Maybe she places a steady hand on her daughter's shoulder. The gesture is simple but unmistakable. This conversation is no longer one-sided. It's no longer a group versus a teenager. It's adults speaking to another adult who refuses to be intimidated. Her tone matters. She doesn't come in screaming. She doesn't need to. Controlled anger is far more effective. A calm but firm, "What's going on here?" forces the group to explain themselves. The question flips the script. Now they're the ones being evaluated. Adults who were confident a moment ago often stumble when confronted by a parent who won't back down. They may try to justify their actions. They might say they were just asking questions or looking out for the neighborhood. But those phrases sound thinner when directed at someone who knows her child belongs there. The mother hears the gaps immediately. She asks specifics. Who started this? What rule was broken? What exactly did my daughter do? Vague suspicions don't hold up well under direct questioning. The confidence that came from standing over a teen weakens when faced with someone who demands clarity. There's also an emotional layer that can't be ignored. A mother carries protective instinct in a way that's hard to describe. It isn't theatrical. It's steady and grounded. She isn't just defending a point. She's defending her child's sense of safety. That makes her presence heavier than the group expected. They might have assumed a parent would apologize quickly, eager to smooth things over. They might have expected embarrassment or compliance. Instead, they're met with boundaries. My daughter doesn't owe you that. You don't get to speak to her like that. If you had concerns, you could have handled this differently. Each statement reframes the situation. The mother also understands something her daughter couldn't fully leverage in the moment: accountability. She knows about HOA procedures. She knows about security protocols. She knows that confronting a minor without cause can have consequences. When she references those systems calmly, it reminds the group that authority isn't informal or unlimited. She isn't there to escalate. She's there to correct. Her refusal to be intimidated exposes the imbalance that was there all along. The group can no longer hide behind numbers. They can't lean on tone or posture. They're speaking to someone who matches their age, their standing, their right to be there. There's a visible shift when adults realize they misjudged the situation. Voices lower. Postures relax slightly. The certainty fades. Some may glance at each other, silently recalculating. The dynamic that felt so solid minutes earlier starts to unravel under scrutiny. The mother remains steady. She listens, but she doesn't concede. She allows explanations, but she doesn't accept blame placed where it doesn't belong. She models something powerful in front of her daughter: how to confront unfair treatment without losing composure. That lesson lingers. Her presence sends a message beyond the immediate exchange. It tells the group that young people are not isolated targets. It signals that assumptions will be challenged. It reinforces that community safety cannot come at the cost of basic respect. The confrontation becomes less about suspicion and more about boundaries. And in that moment, the secure community feels different. Not because of the gates or the cameras, but because someone stepped forward who understood exactly how to stand firm without stepping back. Accountability rarely shows up on its own. It usually arrives because someone insists on it. After the confrontation, there's often an unspoken hope among those who overstep that the moment will simply fade, that everyone will go home, cool off, and pretend it was a misunderstanding. In communities built on image, maintaining peace on the surface can feel more important than addressing what actually happened underneath. But when a parent refuses to let it slide, the story doesn't end on the sidewalk. Accountability starts with documentation, a written complaint, an email to the HOA board, a request for security footage. Calm, detailed, factual, not emotional, not exaggerated, just clear. Time, location, names, witnesses. That alone shifts the tone from neighborhood gossip to formal concern. People who were confident during the confrontation often grow cautious when things move into official channels. An informal accusation feels powerful in the moment. A formal review feels different. Now there are records. There are policies to reference. There are questions about whether proper procedure was followed. The same adults who spoke freely may begin choosing their words more carefully. In many communities, there are rules about how concerns should be handled. Contact security first. Avoid direct confrontation. Do not detain or intimidate. Those guidelines exist for a reason. When they're ignored, it becomes harder to justify behavior as simple vigilance. Accountability forces reflection. The group may have believed they were protecting the neighborhood, but once their actions are examined under policy, that belief may not be enough. Good intentions don't erase impact. Feeling suspicious doesn't justify cornering a minor. Wanting order doesn't grant authority. There's also social accountability. Word travels, not as gossip, but as awareness. Neighbors who stayed silent might rethink what they saw. They might realize that what felt uncomfortable in the moment had a name. Overreach, intimidation, misuse of authority. The narrative shifts from concerned residents to adults who went too far. That shift matters. Communities often operate on informal power structures. Certain residents speak louder at meetings. Some feel entitled to enforce norms. But when their actions are challenged publicly and formally, that informal power weakens. Others become less likely to follow their lead unquestioned. For the teenager, accountability sends a different message. It tells her that what happened wasn't normal, that adults don't get a free pass simply because they're older, that her discomfort was valid enough to be addressed beyond the moment. It restores a sense of balance that was briefly lost. Accountability doesn't have to mean dramatic punishment. Sometimes it's a formal warning, a reminder sent to all residents about proper procedures, a discussion at the next HOA meeting about respectful communication. Even that can be significant. It sets a boundary for the future. It makes clear that community safety cannot override individual rights. The adults involved may feel embarrassed, defensive, frustrated that something they saw as minor has become official. But discomfort is part of accountability. It's the signal that behavior crossed a line. Secure communities often pride themselves on order and structure. Accountability tests whether that structure applies evenly. Are rules enforced only against teenagers and perceived outsiders? Or do they also apply to homeowners who misuse their standing? When processes are followed transparently, it strengthens the community more than silence ever could. Security footage, if reviewed, may show body language more clearly than memory does. A cluster of adults standing too close. A teen with limited space to move. Facts captured without interpretation. Evidence has a way of cutting through justification. The expectation might have been that the mother would calm her daughter and move on, that she would prioritize harmony over confrontation. Instead, insisting on accountability reframes the situation entirely. It signals that safety includes protection from intimidation. That being part of a community means more than paying dues. That authority has limits. Over time, that insistence can change behavior. Residents may think twice before confronting someone directly. They may choose to call security instead of stepping in aggressively. They may remember that actions have consequences beyond the moment. Accountability doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't undo the fear or the tension. What it does is draw a line in clear terms. It defines what is acceptable and what is not, even inside gates that were supposed to guarantee safety.